breaking the tracks of racism, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. In 1619, a privateer, the White Lion, brought 20 enslaved Africans into the British colony in Jamestown, Virginia, marking the beginning of slavery and racism in the United States. More Africans were taken from their homes as slavery's importance in the United States economy grew. In the 18th century alone, more than 6 million enslaved people were brought to the U.S. The slaves were used for manual labor without limit and were treated as property. They were treated poorly and were considered as not human because of their skin color. Slavery was widespread and a large part of the economy in the United States. However, some disagreed with the idea of slavery, noticing the appalling truth behind the act. This debate on the freedom of slaves resulted in the American Civil War on April 12, 1861. The North fought for the freedom of the enslaved, and the South depended on slavery for the well-being of their economy. After months of deadly conflict, the war ended with the South surrendering. This marked the end of slavery in the United States and the start of a new frontier, one of equality. On January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln proclaimed, "Slaves within any state or designated part of a state in rebellion shall be thenceforth and forever free." Following the abolition of slavery in the United States, all African Americans were considered free people. Although free, systemic racism hindered them from having equal rights. To break the barrier of racism, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was established to pioneer new frontiers of equality and claim the rights African Americans deserved in the workplace. The Civil War resulted in about 3 million enslaved people in Confederate states being freed. However, the slaves were given minimal basic needs while they were slaves. Now they had to get their basic needs, which caused many of the former slaves to search and scavenge for any jobs they could find. In 1862, George Pullman, a white entrepreneur, established the Pullman Company, a high-class railroad company. He designed, manufactured, and ran luxury sleeping cars, featuring carpeting, draperies, upholstered chairs, libraries, card tables, and most importantly, an unparalleled level of customer service. Around 1867, George Pullman began hiring porters to lug baggage, shine shoes, set up and clean the sleeping berths, and serve passengers. However, Pullman did not want anyone doing this job. He needed people who would do their job diligently, professionally, and give the utmost care and attention to the passengers. So he had the company hire black men from the South, almost all of the men recently freed from slavery. George chose the formerly enslaved, knowing that they would perform their job as they did as slaves. However, hiring them was not the problem. The problem was their treatment. A. Philip Randolph, a writer and the editor for the Messenger magazine and an important activist for black people, wrote in one of his articles, "The Pullman porter is in a miserable and tragic plight. His wages are low, his hours of work are long, his condition under which he works are bad. He has no effective voice in regulation of the conditions of his job. Few workers in America are so low in the industrial world. Still, few workers render a more essential and socially useful service, and few workers are helpless. Few workers are as steady, as reliable, as loyal to their employers." Through his articles, Randolph showed the unfairness that the Pullman porters had at work. They were earning only $60 a month if they either traveled 11,000 miles or rode for 400 plus hours in that month. But the year's pay was around $720 to $1,280 less than the annual salary of the average American. Unfair wages were not the only issue, but the expectations for what the Pullman porters had to accomplish were far-fetched.
3 hours a night.
So you worked 21 hours and you slept 3?
That's right.
Often, porters are compelled to double back, which is where they would have to take the same train back to their original destination, serving those going back. The porter has no time for sleep or rest, rarely any time for even freshening up. The issue is that the porter gets no extra salary at all for doubling back, only his normal monthly salary. The Pullman porters were struggling as systemic racism resulted in the inequity in the workplace. Changes needed to happen. So the porters reached out to Randolph, whose several articles on the porters had gained wide support. Randolph agreed to help the Pullman porters. On August 25, 1925, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, or the BSCP, was born, with Philip Randolph as the president. Their goal was to give the Pullman porters increased wages, fair working requirements, better working conditions, and equality despite their race and status. In the March 1926 edition of The Messenger, Randolph wrote, "If there are some who will ask, what have we done? It has awakened the black workers everywhere to a sense of their power, responsibility, and rights. It has stood out upon the frontiers of struggle and hurled a challenge in the teeth of cruel greed, ruthless avarice, and hateful oppression. We have built up the mightiest economic movement among blacks in the world. For the first time in the history of our race, we have formulated and presented to the public a solid, sound, sane, and sober program for the liberation of a large group of black workers in particular, and the race in general. As a result of the program and agitation of the Brotherhood, the porters are being paid for doubles from as far back as April 1st, 1925. In less than 5 months, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters made a change in the Pullman Company's strict and unequal rules. The resistance was victorious in little time, and Randolph had goals to make the frontier of equality far more successful. However, some did not benefit from this success. The Pullman Company was in strong opposition to the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Not only did it force them to pay the porters more, but more importantly, they were losing control. The porters' organizing would result in the Pullman Company losing their position of supremacy, so the Pullman Company resorted to defensive measures to stop the Brotherhood from further growth. The Pullman Company began firing those who were part of the union and decided to make their own union, one run by the company. The Pullman Company brought several African Americans from the South and made them sit in yards where the porters could see them, to let the porters know that any wrong moves can make them easily replaced. The Pullman Company employed spies, tried intimidation, and made propaganda, all to destroy the Union. However, the efforts made by the Pullman Company were not enough. On April 26, 1926, the House of Representatives in the 69th Congress came up with a resolution regarding the case of the Pullman porters. Whereas its net profits were $15,771,976, of which $12,631,103 was from sleeping car and kindred services alone, and that being said, huge profits are ample and sufficient to better the working conditions, hours of employment, and wages of Pullman porters and maids. Whereas every reasonable effort made by the Pullman porters and maids to organize for the purpose of collective bargaining has met with constant and stubborn resistance of the Pullman Company, who have used every known method that wealth can purchase to prevent said organization. Therefore, be it resolved that the Committee on Labor, House of Representatives, be hereby empowered to investigate the wages, hours, and conditions of employment of the Pullman porters and maids, and to investigate the financial history and financial conditions of the Pullman Company, as same may affect wages and conditions of employment to the end that exploitation of said Pullman employees might be prevented. Soon after the House's resolution, the Railway Labor Act was approved in May 1926, stating that all negotiations relating to wages, rules, and working conditions involving railroad workers would need to be settled between the laborers and the company management. The BSCP advocated to the Pullman Company for their equal rights, and after years of stalling, the Pullman Company agreed. On April 25, 1936, the Pullman Company signed the first ever agreement between a union of African American workers and an American corporation. This frontier of equality in the workplace inspired many, and resulted in the idea of an equal workspace for not only the porters, but for people of all demographics. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was the catalyst to make all jobs equal. The frontier of equality broke the tracks of racism. Recently, discrimination in the workplace has been alive, but not due to racism, but gender. Gender inequality in the workplace is alive, with women being paid less and offered fewer jobs than men. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters managed to fix inequality for the porters, and what the world needs now is someone like A. Philip Randolph, who can lead a frontier to total equality.